You gave my room to your mother?
She needs it more than you do.
When I came home after 3 weeks recovering from knee surgery, my clothes were packed in cardboard boxes outside my bedroom. Inside, my daughter-in-law Madison was arranging fresh pillows while her mother's suitcases sat beside my bed. "Patricia needs the bigger room," Madison said. "You'll be fine in the guest room." I looked at my son Ethan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he muttered, "it's just a room." Then I saw my late husband Robert's old walnut dresser still against the wall. The bottom drawer hadn't been opened in 20 years, and suddenly I remembered his final warning about it. I still had the key. Before I tell you what Robert left inside that drawer, tell me something in the comments. If your own child stood there and allowed this to happen in your home, would you stay quiet? If stories about family betrayal and finding the courage to stand up for yourself speak to you, please like and subscribe. What happened next changed the way I saw my son forever. The house had not always felt like a place where I needed permission to enter my own bedroom. For most of my life, it had been the safest place I knew. Robert and I bought the 2-story brick house in Richmond, Virginia, in the spring of 1986. I still remembered standing on the front lawn with a real estate agent while Robert walked around the foundation twice, crouching near the corners and studying the brickwork, as if he were inspecting a bridge. He was 32, then a structural engineer who trusted measurements more than promises. I was 31 and working as an office manager for an insurance company downtown. Between us, we had enough savings for the down payment and just enough optimism to believe we could handle everything else. The house wasn't luxurious. The kitchen had yellow countertops. The upstairs carpet was brown. One bathroom faucet squealed every time we turned it on. But it was ours. Robert replaced that faucet himself. We painted the dining room on our first wedding anniversary in the house. Ethan learned to ride a bicycle in the driveway. Every Christmas morning for years, I stood at the top of the staircase while Ethan raced toward the tree in his pajamas. Robert and I paid that mortgage month after month, year after year. We weren't wealthy people. We were careful people. That distinction mattered to Robert. "Money doesn't make you secure, Zoe," he once told me while balancing our checkbook at the kitchen table. "Knowing what belongs to you and knowing how to protect it does." At the time, I teased him for sounding like a financial planner. Looking back, I wish I had listened more carefully. Robert died 20 years ago. Even now, saying that in my mind could make something inside my chest tighten. He became sick quickly, and our lives shrank from work schedules and grocery lists to hospital appointments and medication bottles. I had imagined growing old beside him. Instead, I learned how quiet a king-sized bed could become when only one person slept in it. After the funeral, people encouraged me to sell the house. They said it was too large, too many stairs, too many memories, but I couldn't. Every room held some piece of us, so I stayed. Ethan was already an adult by then, trying to establish his own life. Eventually, he married Madison. A few years later, Lily was born, and suddenly the house that had become painfully quiet filled with noise again whenever they visited. Lily would run through the hallway calling Grandma. Those visits kept me going more than Ethan probably ever understood. For years, I believed I had the best possible arrangement. My son had his own family. I had my independence, and we remained close enough to share birthdays, holidays, and Sunday dinners. Then 3 years ago, Ethan called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I knew something was wrong before he finished saying hello. The logistics company where he'd worked as an operations manager was restructuring. His position had been eliminated. "They gave me severance," he said quickly. "I'll find something." "I know you will." But weeks passed, then months. Ethan found occasional contract work, but nothing stable. Their savings began disappearing. Madison was working part-time in administrative support, but her income couldn't cover their mortgage, car payments, insurance, groceries, and everything else. One evening, Ethan sat at my kitchen table with his elbows resting on his knees. "I feel like I've failed them, Mom." I reached across and touched his hand. "You lost a job. You didn't lose your worth. That was when I made the offer. Move in here." Ethan looked up. "Just temporarily," I continued. 6 months. Save some money. Get yourself steady again." He resisted at first. Madison didn't. When I told her, she hugged me so tightly I nearly dropped the coffee cup in my hand. "Zoe, you have no idea what this means to us." I thought I did. I thought I was giving my son breathing room. I thought I was protecting Lily from watching her parents drown financially. Most of all, I thought family was supposed to help family. They moved in 2 weeks later. I didn't charge them rent. I didn't ask them to pay utilities. I wanted every dollar they could save to help them get back on their feet. The first few months were almost wonderful. Lily ate breakfast with me before school. Ethan fixed things around the house. Madison cooked dinner several nights a week and constantly thanked me. Then small things began changing. One morning I came downstairs and discovered my kitchen curtains were gone. Madison had replaced them with white ones. The old ones made the room dark, she explained. I didn't particularly like the new curtains, but arguing about curtains seemed ridiculous. So I smiled. They're nice. Later she reorganized my pantry, then the kitchen cabinets, then the living room furniture. Each time there was the reasonable explanation. This works better. This gives us more space. This is safer. It'll be easier for everyone. 6 months arrived. Ethan still hadn't found permanent work. I never mentioned the deadline. Another 6 months passed. By then, the boxes they'd arrived with had disappeared into closets. Family photographs of Ethan, Madison, and Lily appeared on walls where Robert's photographs had once hung. I noticed. I said nothing. When Madison replaced the old dining chairs, she told me mine were worn out. When she moved Robert's books from the living room shelves into storage, she said nobody read them anymore. I remember standing in front of those shelves afterward, staring at the empty spaces. I almost asked her to put everything back. Almost. Then Lily came through the door, talking excitedly about a school project, and I swallowed the words. That became my pattern. Every time something bothered me, I asked myself whether it was worth creating tension. Usually I decided it wasn't. I told myself I was being flexible. I told myself sharing a home required compromise. I told myself Ethan was going through a difficult period and didn't need his mother making things harder. But compromise changes meaning when only one person is doing it. The first time Madison called the place our house, we were standing in the kitchen. She was talking to a neighbor. We're thinking about doing something with our backyard next summer. Our backyard. I looked at Ethan. He had heard it. He didn't correct her. That should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I convinced myself it was just language. After all, they lived there. They were family. What difference did 2 little words make? A year later, I found myself asking Madison where she'd moved my roasting pan. Another time, I asked whether it would be inconvenient if I invited 2 old coworkers over for lunch. She stared at her calendar before saying Thursday would probably be better. I thanked her. Later that night, I stood brushing my teeth and suddenly wondered why I had thanked my daughter-in-law for allowing me to invite friends into my own home. The thought embarrassed me. But even then I did nothing, because underneath every compromise was the same fear. If I pushed too hard, Ethan might leave angry. If Ethan left angry, maybe Lily would stop coming around. I had already lost Robert. The possibility of losing my son and granddaughter frightened me more than losing control of a few rooms. So 6 months became 1 year. 1 year became 2, and 2 became 3. By then, Madison no longer behaved like someone temporarily living in my house. She behaved like someone waiting for it to become hers. I simply hadn't been willing to see it yet. Then came my knee surgery. My older sister Carol insisted I recover at her house outside Charlottesville because her guest room was downstairs and she could drive me to physical therapy. I agreed to stay 3 weeks. Before I left, I stood in my bedroom packing a small suitcase. Robert's walnut dresser was against the far wall. Madison appeared in the doorway. "Don't worry about anything here," she said brightly. "We'll take care of the house." I remember smiling. "Thank you." 3 weeks later, I came home and found my life packed into cardboard boxes. My bedroom belonged to Patricia. My son couldn't look me in the eye. And suddenly, all those little compromises no longer looked little. They looked like footsteps, one after another, leading straight to the moment when someone else could stand inside my bedroom and decide where I was allowed to sleep. But as I lay awake in the guest room that first night, one question kept returning. Madison hadn't merely taken my room. She had acted as though she already had the right to decide what happened to my house, and I was beginning to wonder who had convinced her of that. The next morning I woke before sunrise, though calling it waking wasn't entirely accurate. I had barely slept. The guest room at the end of the hallway had once been Lily's room when she stayed overnight as a little girl. It was comfortable enough, a full-sized bed, a narrow dresser, one window facing the backyard, but that wasn't the point. I lay there listening to footsteps moving through my house. My house. I repeated those words silently because for the first time in 39 years I felt the need to remind myself. At 7, I heard Madison laughing downstairs. When I entered the kitchen, she was making coffee while Patricia sat at the table. "Morning, Zoey," Patricia said. She sounded almost too cheerful. "Morning." Madison turned around. "How's the knee better?" "See, the smaller room is probably good for you. Less walking around." I stared at her. My bedroom and the guest room were on the same floor. There was no less walking. But Madison said it so naturally that correcting her felt almost absurd. Patricia looked down at her coffee. That was the first moment I noticed something I had missed the day before. She looked uncomfortable. Patricia Collins and I had never been close, but we'd always been cordial. She lived in Florida for years, so we mostly saw each other at Christmas, Lily's birthdays, and the occasional family gathering. She wasn't cruel. She was opinionated, certainly, but she had never treated me disrespectfully. "Madison says you sold your condo," I said. Patricia nodded. "Closed last month." "And you're looking for something here?" "That was the plan," Madison answered before Patricia could continue. "Mom doesn't need to rush. She can stay as long as she needs." I looked directly at Madison. In my bedroom, the kitchen became quiet. Ethan walked in at exactly the wrong moment. He opened the refrigerator, saw our faces, and stopped. "What's going on?" I asked how long Patricia is staying in my bedroom. Madison sighed. "Zoey, are we really doing this again? As though I had been nagging her for weeks instead of discovering the arrangement less than 24 hours earlier. Ethan closed the refrigerator. "Mom, nobody's trying to upset you. Then why did nobody ask me?" Patricia shifted in her chair. "I thought you knew." Madison's head snapped toward her. I looked at Patricia. Knew what? Patricia hesitated. "Madison told me you wanted to move into the smaller room." For several seconds, nobody spoke. "Why would I want that?" She said, "Because of your knee. She said the big bedroom was becoming difficult for you." I almost laughed. Both bedrooms were 20 feet apart. Madison folded her arms. "I said we discussed options." "No," I replied. "We didn't." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "Can we not turn breakfast into a fight?" That sentence told me everything about where he stood. The problem wasn't what Madison had done. The problem was that I was objecting to it. I pushed my chair back. "I'd like my things returned to my room." Madison's expression hardened. Patricia already unpacked. I looked at Ethan. Again he avoided my eyes. Something inside me went very still. I left the kitchen. Upstairs, daylight revealed details I hadn't noticed the night before. 3 cardboard boxes containing my clothes sat against the hallway wall. Another held books, framed photographs, and small personal things collected over decades. I opened it. On top was my wedding photograph. Robert wore the dark suit his brother had lent him. I was 24, wearing a dress my mother and I had spent months paying for. I touched the glass. They hadn't even wrapped it. Underneath were photographs of Ethan as a boy, Robert's old alarm clock, and the ceramic dish where I kept my wedding ring at night. Then I noticed something else was missing. Robert's chair. It had stood beside the bedroom window for decades, a wide-backed leather chair where he used to read engineering journals on Sunday afternoons. I went downstairs and opened the garage. There it was, wedged beside a lawnmower beneath an old blanket. For some reason, seeing that chair in the garage hurt worse than seeing my clothes in boxes. Furniture shouldn't matter that much, but it wasn't furniture to me. It was Robert sitting by the window saying, "Zoey, come look at this," whenever he found something interesting. It was 30 years of mornings and evenings. It was evidence that he had lived there. I pulled the blanket away. Grandma, I turned. Lily stood in the doorway. At 15, she was nearly as tall as I was. She wore an oversized sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. "What are you doing up?" She shrugged, couldn't sleep. Her eyes moved toward the chair, then toward me. "I'm sorry." "For what?" Her lower lip tightened. "For Mom." I straightened. "Lily, whatever is happening between adults isn't your responsibility, I know, but she shouldn't have done it." I didn't answer. Lily stepped closer. "I told Dad." "Told him what? That it was wrong to move your stuff?" My heart tightened. What did he say? He said Mom was stressed. Of course. Another explanation. Another excuse. Lily looked towards the house before lowering her voice. "They were talking about it before you came home." My attention sharpened. "About Patricia taking my room? About Grandma Patricia moving in? And the house? She nodded. I wasn't trying to listen. "They were in the kitchen. What did they say?" Lily hesitated. "Mom said Grandma Patricia shouldn't have to squeeze into a guest room when there's a bigger room available. That alone wasn't surprising anymore." Then Lily continued. "Dad said you might get upset. I waited. And Mom said—" Lily stopped. She looked embarrassed. She said, "It'll be ours eventually anyway." For a moment, the garage seemed completely silent. Even the sounds from the street disappeared. I stared at my granddaughter. Those were her exact words. Lily nodded. Dad told her not to talk like that. A tiny piece of hope rose inside me. Then she added, "But he didn't say she was wrong." There it was. I looked back at Robert's chair. For 3 years I had explained away every little change. The curtains, the pantry, the photographs, the furniture, the phrase, "our house." I had told myself Madison was simply making herself comfortable. Now I understood something colder. She wasn't getting comfortable in my home. She was practicing ownership. I thanked Lily and made her promise not to involve herself further. When I returned upstairs, Patricia was leaving my bedroom. She stopped when she saw me. "Zoe, I really thought this was your idea. I believe you." She seemed relieved, but I wasn't ready to discuss more. My eyes moved past her into the bedroom. Against the far wall stood Robert's walnut dresser. Everything around it had changed. New bedding, Patricia's suitcase, different photographs, but the dresser remained, and at the very bottom was the narrow drawer no one had opened in 20 years. Suddenly, Robert's old words stirred somewhere in my memory, words I had spent 2 decades trying to forget. That afternoon, Madison passed me in the hallway and glanced toward the dresser. "Oh," she said casually, "Mom hates that old thing. We're probably getting rid of it." I turned slowly toward her. For the first time since coming home, my fear began giving way to something else. "No," I said. Madison blinked. "No, that dresser stays." She stared at me as if she wasn't accustomed to hearing that word from my mouth. Maybe she wasn't. And that realization frightened me almost as much as Lily's warning, because if Madison truly believed this house would eventually belong to her, I needed to know why. And somewhere inside that locked drawer, I was beginning to suspect Robert had left me the answer. That night, I discovered there is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being displaced without actually leaving home. I lay in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling while the house settled around me. A pipe clicked behind the wall. The air conditioner hummed. Somewhere down the hallway, a floorboard creaked. I knew every sound. I had lived with them for nearly 40 years. Yet lying there, surrounded by furniture chosen for visitors, I felt like one myself. I turned onto my side and looked at the digital clock. 1:17 a.m. Sleep wasn't coming. Instead, Robert came back to me. Not as he had been during our strongest years, standing in the driveway with rolled-up blueprints under his arm, but as he had looked near the end. Thin, tired, still stubbornly alert. It had been 20 years earlier during one of his final weeks at home. The doctors had stopped talking about recovery by then. We both knew what that meant, though neither of us liked saying it aloud. One afternoon, I found Robert sitting in his leather chair beside our bedroom window. "You're supposed to be resting," I told him. "I am resting. You're reorganizing papers. That can be restful." I laughed despite myself. That was Robert. Even dying couldn't convince him that paperwork wasn't a recreational activity. Several folders sat on his lap. He closed them when I entered. "Come here, Zoe." Something in his voice made me stop smiling. I sat on the edge of the bed. Robert looked toward the walnut dresser across the room. We had bought it at an estate sale during our 2nd year of marriage. It was heavy, beautifully made, and so solid that every time we rearranged the bedroom, Robert complained we should have bought something cheaper. "See the bottom drawer?" he asked. "Of course." I changed the lock. I frowned. "What lock?" he pointed. Only then did I notice the small brass keyhole beneath the drawer handle. Why Robert reached into his shirt pocket and handed me a tiny brass key. "Keep this somewhere safe." I remember turning it between my fingers. "What did you put in there?" "Something I hope you'll never need." I gave him a suspicious look. "Robert." He reached for my hand. His fingers felt thinner than I remembered. "Zoe, listen to me." I did. "If Ethan ever forgets the difference between love and entitlement, open the bottom drawer." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "You'll know if the day comes." "Robert, you're frightening me." "That isn't what I'm trying to do." "Then explain it." His eyes moved toward the window. For several seconds he said nothing. "Ethan is a good kid," I insisted. "I know. He loves us. I know that too." "Then why are you talking like this?" Robert squeezed my hand. "Because loving someone doesn't mean pretending they're incapable of making bad choices." I became irritated. At the time, I thought illness had made him overly cautious. Ethan was young, yes, but he was building his life. He had made mistakes like everyone else. Whatever Robert was worried about, I didn't want to hear it during the last days we had together. I'm not going to spend our time talking about something Ethan might theoretically do 20 years from now. A sad smile crossed Robert's face. All right, that ended the conversation. Or at least I thought it did. After Robert died, I placed the brass key beneath the velvet lining of my jewelry box. I locked the drawer. Then I did something only grief can make seem reasonable. I decided never to think about it again. Years passed. Ethan married Madison. Lily was born. Life continued. Every so often, while dusting the dresser, my fingers passed over that small keyhole. I remembered Robert's warning, and every time I told myself the same thing: I don't need to know. Because opening that drawer felt like admitting Robert might have seen something in our son that I hadn't. Now, 20 years later, I lay in the guest room and heard Ethan's voice from the day before. Mom, it's just a room. Then Lily's. Mom said it'll be ours eventually anyway. For the first time, Robert's warning didn't sound strange. It sounded specific. I sat up. The clock read 2:06. Part of me wanted to walk into the bedroom immediately and open the drawer. But Patricia was sleeping there. I couldn't exactly creep into a room occupied by a sleeping woman and start unlocking furniture. So I waited. By breakfast, I had decided on one thing. The dresser wasn't leaving the house. I found Madison in the hallway later that morning with her phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call when she saw me. Everything okay? I want Robert's chair brought back upstairs. Her eyebrows rose. From the garage? Yes. Mom likes having more space. It isn't Patricia's chair. Madison's lips tightened. Fine, we'll figure it out. And the dresser stays. She exhaled loudly. Zoe, we talked about this. No, you talked. I said no. That stopped her. I had surprised myself, too. Madison glanced toward the bedroom. It's huge. It's outdated. Mom says it makes the room depressing. Then Patricia can use another room. Madison stared at me. You seriously want my mother to move because of a piece of furniture? This isn't about furniture. Then what is it about? I almost told her. I almost said there was something locked inside. Instead, instinct stopped me. Robert bought it. Madison's expression softened just enough to become condescending. I understand you're sentimental, but you can't keep everything forever. She stepped around me. Then she added, actually, I already arranged for some old furniture to be picked up. My stomach tightened. When tomorrow morning... What furniture things nobody uses? The dresser. She didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. You are not taking it. Madison turned back. Zoe, nobody is trying to erase Robert. The fact that she used the word erase made my chest tighten. I hadn't accused her of that. Not aloud. You packed our wedding photograph in a box, I said. She rolled her eyes. Because Mom needed space. You put his chair in the garage. It was clutter. And now you want to throw away his dresser. Donate, she corrected. Something changed inside me then. Not dramatically. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten her. I simply stopped trying to make her comfortable. That dresser does not leave this house. Madison studied me for several seconds. Then she gave a small shrug. We'll talk about it with Ethan, as though my decision required approval. She walked downstairs. I remained in the hallway. Through the open bedroom door, I could see the dresser. For 20 years, I had respected Robert's silence because I believed protecting my image of Ethan was more important than knowing whatever truth my husband had buried. But Robert had given me a condition, not a date, not an age, a condition. If Ethan ever forgets the difference between love and entitlement, I reached into my pocket and closed my fingers around the jewelry box key. Not the brass key, not yet. But I knew exactly where it was. And for the first time in 20 years, I knew I was going to use it. By dinner, Madison had stopped mentioning the dresser. For a few hours, I let myself believe my refusal had worked. That was before she brought up the realtor. We were halfway through dinner when Madison placed her fork beside her plate and looked at Ethan. It was a small glance. Quick, practiced, but I saw it. So she began. Someone is coming by tomorrow afternoon. I looked up. Who, a realtor? My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. A realtor for what? Madison smiled as if I had asked something perfectly ordinary. For the house. The room went quiet. Patricia lowered her glass. Lily stared at her plate. Ethan kept chewing. I looked from one face to another. My house, Madison gave a soft laugh. Well, yes, obviously. Why is a realtor coming to my house to evaluate it? Why? She leaned back. Zoe, we've talked about how much work this place is becoming. No, you have. Ethan finally looked at me. Mom, just hear her out. That sentence frightened me more than Madison's announcement. Hear her out. So this wasn't something Madison had arranged on her own. Ethan knew. Madison folded her hands on the table. This house is almost 40 years old. It has stairs. The yard requires maintenance. There are rooms nobody uses. Your knee surgery should be a wake-up call. A wake-up call for what? That you don't need this much house anymore. I felt heat rising into my face. I've managed perfectly well. So far. The words landed harder than she intended, or perhaps exactly as hard as she intended. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Madison, I'm not criticizing her mom. I'm being practical. Then she turned back to me. We found some beautiful condos not far from here. 1 level, secure entrance, landscaping included. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I looked at Ethan. You've been looking at condos for me? He wiped his mouth with his napkin, just online. Without asking me, we were exploring options. For my life, Mom, don't make it sound like that. How should I make it sound? Lily glanced between us. I hated that she was witnessing this, but for once I couldn't swallow my questions to protect everyone else. Madison stepped in. If the house sells for what similar properties are getting, you could buy a smaller place outright and still have a significant amount left. There it was, not concern. Arithmetic. What happens to the significant amount left? Madison hesitated for only a second. It stays in the family. I almost laughed. Whose family, Zoe? No, explain it. Ethan leaned forward. Mom, we're struggling. I looked at him. For the first time, he wasn't pretending this was entirely about my knee. I know, I've been doing contract work, but it's inconsistent. We're trying to rebuild. I gave you somewhere to live for 3 years, and we're grateful. Then why does gratitude require selling my house? His face tightened. That isn't fair. Madison answered for him. Nobody said you would get nothing. You'd have a new condo. Probably a nicer one than you need. The rest could help Ethan and me finally get back on our feet. I stared at her. She had said it without embarrassment. You've already decided what I need. That's not what I meant. You just said it. Patricia looked at her daughter. Madison, maybe this isn't the time. Madison sighed. When is the time? After Zoe falls down the stairs, my knee was replaced. I'm not incompetent. I didn't say you were. You're discussing selling my home as if I'm not sitting here. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face. Can everybody calm down? I turned toward him. Did you know she called a realtor silence, Ethan? Yes. The answer was quiet, but it was enough. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not all at once. It was more like discovering a fracture had been there for a long time. I looked around the dining room. Robert and I had stripped wallpaper from those walls ourselves. Ethan had done homework at that table. Lily had blown out birthday candles there. Now my son and his wife were discussing converting all of it into money, and dividing that money before I was even dead. I am not selling this house. Madison's expression changed. The warmth disappeared. We're not asking you to decide tonight. I just did. Zoe, no, that word again. It was becoming easier. Madison pushed her chair back. You're being emotional. I smiled without humor. It's my house. I'm allowed to be emotional about it. She left the table. Ethan followed her a minute later. Patricia remained seated. She looked as if she wanted to say something, but Lily spoke first. Grandma, can I help you with the dishes? You don't have to. I want to. We carried plates into the kitchen. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Lily whispered, Grandma, yes. There's something else. I turned off the faucet. What? She glanced toward the doorway. I heard Mom talking on the phone this afternoon with whom I don't know. Lily lowered her voice. She said people are coming tomorrow morning to take furniture. My stomach tightened. What furniture? She made a list. Did you see it? Lily nodded. The old desk from the basement, some chairs, boxes from the garage. She stopped. And Grandpa's dresser. For 1 second I couldn't move. What time? I heard her say 9. 9 o'clock. I looked at the clock above the stove. 7:42 p.m., less than 14 hours. Does your mother know you heard no? Keep it that way. Lily looked frightened. Are you mad at me? I immediately took her hands. No, never. But this is between the adults. I don't want you caught in the middle. She nodded. After she went upstairs, I finished cleaning the kitchen alone. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. An hour earlier I'd been hurt. Now I was thinking, Madison wanted my bedroom. Then she wanted Robert's furniture gone. Now she wanted a realtor evaluating my house. Those were not separate events anymore. They were steps. And Ethan knew about at least some of them. At 10:30 the house became quiet. At 11 I entered the guest room and closed the door. I pulled my jewelry box from my suitcase. It was an old mahogany box Robert had given me for our 15th anniversary. I removed the tray holding my earrings. Beneath it was a thin layer of faded burgundy velvet. My fingers found the loose corner. I lifted it. The brass key lay exactly where I had placed it 20 years earlier, smaller than I remembered. I picked it up. Robert's voice returned to me. If Ethan ever forgets the difference between love and entitlement, open the bottom drawer. For years I had wondered what would justify opening it. Now my clothes were in boxes. My bedroom belonged to someone else. A realtor was coming to evaluate my home, and by 9 tomorrow morning the dresser itself might be gone. I closed my hand around the key. There would be no 21st year. Tonight I was opening that drawer. At 1:47 in the morning I was still awake. The brass key lay in my palm. I had turned it over so many times that its edges had left faint marks against my skin. The house had finally gone quiet. Madison and Ethan's bedroom door had closed around 11. Lily had stopped moving around shortly after midnight. Patricia was sleeping in my room, at least I hoped she was. At 2:03 I got out of bed. I didn't turn on the lamp. I slipped my feet into my slippers, wrapped my robe around myself, and opened the guest room door. The hallway was dark except for the small nightlight near the stairs. 20 feet separated me from my old bedroom. 20 feet had never felt so long. My knee protested with every careful step. When I reached the door, I stopped. It was partly open. Inside, Patricia was sleeping on the left side of my bed. My side. I pushed that thought away. This wasn't about the bed anymore. The walnut dresser stood against the opposite wall. Moonlight from the window touched its polished surface. For a moment I saw Robert standing beside it 20 years earlier. Something I hope you'll never need. I stepped inside. The floorboard near the doorway creaked. Patricia shifted. I froze. She settled again. I continued. At the dresser I crouched carefully. My knee immediately reminded me that my physical therapist would have been furious. The bottom drawer looked exactly as it always had. 3 brass handles, a tiny keyhole beneath the center one. I inserted the key. It didn't turn. My heart sank. I tried again, gently moving it from side to side. Nothing. For one terrible second I wondered whether the lock had rusted or whether I had somehow kept the wrong key for 20 years. Then I pushed it deeper. Click. The sound seemed enormous. I looked toward Patricia. No movement. I pulled the handle. The drawer didn't open. I pulled harder. Still nothing. 20 years of humidity and disuse had sealed the wood tightly. I placed one hand against the dresser and tugged again. The drawer suddenly released with a low scraping sound. Patricia stirred. I stopped breathing. She rolled onto her other side. I waited. Then I looked inside. For years, some foolish part of me had imagined money. Maybe emergency cash. Perhaps jewelry Robert had inherited. Something tangible enough to explain all the secrecy. There was none. Inside lay a large cream-colored envelope tied with string. Beside it was a black ledger notebook. Underneath the notebook sat a small silver key attached to a faded bank tag. A safe deposit box key, and on top of everything was a white envelope. My name was written across it. Zoey, Robert's handwriting. Even after 20 years, I recognized the slight rightward slant immediately. My throat tightened. I sat carefully on the floor. For several seconds, I couldn't touch it. This was something Robert had touched during the final weeks of his life. Something he had prepared knowing I might someday sit exactly where I was sitting. I opened the envelope. Inside were 4 handwritten pages. The first line made my chest ache. Zoey, if you're reading this, then something happened that I hoped never would. I swallowed. Robert continued. I need you to understand something before you read what's in the larger envelope. I love Ethan. Nothing in these papers changes that, but love cannot require blindness. My hands began trembling. I glanced toward the bed. Patricia was still asleep. I continued. There is something about Ethan I never told you. I made that choice because I believed he deserved the chance to learn from one serious mistake without having that mistake become the way his mother saw him forever. I stopped. One serious mistake. What mistake? My mind raced backward through Ethan's 20s, a failed business idea, credit card debt, arguments with Robert that I'd assumed were ordinary father-son conflicts. Nothing seemed large enough to justify a locked drawer. I read faster. At the time, I believed protecting you from the truth was also protecting Ethan. Maybe I was wrong. That's why I'm leaving the truth here instead of destroying it. My stomach tightened. Robert had hidden something from me. Not forgotten to mention it. Hidden it deliberately. I turned the page. If Ethan has grown into the man I believe he can become, close this letter and destroy everything in this drawer. He doesn't deserve to spend his life answering for something he did when he was young. I almost laughed from the cruelty of the timing. If only I could have stopped there. If only I could have closed the drawer and told myself Ethan had become that man. But Robert's next sentence wouldn't let me. If, however, Ethan is trying to pressure you into giving him control of the house, your savings, or decisions that belong to you, then you need to know what happened. My breath caught. House, savings, control. Robert had written those words 20 years ago. I read them again. Then again. How could he have known? My eyes dropped to the next paragraph. 20 years earlier, Robert had seen something I hadn't. And suddenly I was afraid of turning the page. A sound came from the bed. I looked up. Patricia was sitting upright. Zoey. The letter nearly slipped from my hands. She reached toward the lamp. Don't. Too late. Warm light flooded the room. Patricia blinked at me. Then she looked at the open drawer, the envelope, the ledger, the key. What are you doing? I stood as quickly as my knee allowed and gathered the papers against my chest. Something I should have done a long time ago. Patricia pushed the blankets aside. Is that why you didn't want Madison getting rid of the dresser I didn't answer? Her expression changed. Does Madison know something is in there, no, Ethan? I don't think so. She stared at the letter. Zoe, what's happening? I looked at the woman sleeping in my bed because her daughter had decided I no longer needed it. I had every reason not to trust her. But Patricia didn't look triumphant. She looked frightened. I glanced down at Robert's letter. There was still another page. The page that apparently explained what Ethan had done. Before I could decide whether to leave, Patricia said something that stopped me. I need to tell you something. I looked up. She lowered her voice. I never asked Madison for this room. Silence. She told me you wanted to move out of it. My grip tightened around Robert's letter. Patricia continued. She also told me you were getting ready to turn the house over to Ethan. I stared at her. I never said that. I know that now. Something cold moved through me. Madison hadn't merely made a decision without asking me. She had constructed different stories for different people. I looked down at Robert's warning again. Control of the house, control of your savings, decisions that belong to you. The coincidence was no longer something I could ignore. I sat on the edge of the chair beside the dresser. Patricia remained silent. Then I turned to the final page. Whatever Robert had hidden from me for 20 years, I was finally ready to know. And for the first time that night, I realized I might not be the only woman in that house who had been lied to. For several seconds, Patricia and I simply stared at each other. The room felt different now. Not mine, not hers. Just a room where two women were beginning to realize that someone had carefully told each of us a different version of the truth. Patricia pulled her robe around her shoulders. Madison said you were tired of managing the house, she whispered. She said after your surgery, you finally admitted you wanted something smaller. I never said that. I believe you, and I never told anyone I was giving this house to Ethan. Her face tightened. She made it sound like it was already arranged. What exactly did she say? Patricia hesitated, that you were going to put everything in Ethan's hands eventually, and it made sense to start transitioning now. Transitioning. I hated how harmless the word sounded. My clothes in boxes, Robert's chair in the garage, a realtor coming to evaluate my house. All of it could apparently be called a transition if the person being displaced wasn't allowed to describe it. Why didn't you ask me? I said. Patricia looked ashamed. I should have. Yes. I thought maybe you didn't want to discuss money with me. That was believable. Patricia and I had never shared financial details. She looked at the letter in my hands. Is that from Robert? I nodded. Do you want me to leave? The question surprised me. It was the first time since I'd returned home that someone had asked what I wanted. Yes, I said gently, for a little while. Patricia nodded. She took her slippers and went downstairs. I closed the bedroom door. Then I sat in Robert's old place by the window, though his chair was still in the garage. The replacement chair felt wrong beneath me. I unfolded the final pages. Robert's handwriting seemed steadier there, almost clinical. Zoe, when Ethan was 23, he came to me because he was in trouble. I remembered that year. Ethan had been restless after college, convinced regular employment was beneath his ambitions. He and a friend named Kyle had started a small business supplying renovation materials to contractors. It lasted less than a year. Ethan told me they had simply failed. Robert's letter told another story. The business had accumulated debt, more than Ethan admitted. When creditors began demanding payment, Ethan panicked. He had access to one of our family savings accounts because Robert had once added him for an emergency while we were traveling. Ethan withdrew money, not hundreds, thousands, without asking either of us. I lowered the letter. No, I whispered. I wanted Robert to be wrong. I wanted the next paragraph to explain that it had been a misunderstanding. Instead, it got worse. Ethan intended to replace the money after receiving payment from a contract he believed was coming. The contract never came. Robert discovered the withdrawal while reviewing our accounts. He confronted Ethan privately. According to the letter, Ethan broke down. He admitted everything. Robert repaid the missing amount from another account before I noticed. He then forced Ethan to sell what remained of the failed business and repay him over time. But Robert never told me. I pressed my fingers against my mouth. Memories rearranged themselves, the tension between them that summer. Robert suddenly insisting Ethan find steady work. Ethan avoiding Sunday dinner for nearly a month. I had assumed it was a father and son disagreeing about responsibility. It had been something much bigger. Why didn't you tell me? The answer waited in Robert's letter. I knew you would forgive him, Zoe. That's one of the things I love most about you. But sometimes you forgive before people have learned what their actions cost. Tears blurred the words. I wiped them away. Robert wrote that Ethan had eventually repaid everything. That mattered to him. He believed our son deserved the chance to move forward. But one thing had troubled him. When confronted, Ethan repeatedly said I was going to put it back. Robert had underlined that sentence. Then beneath it, he kept talking about his intention instead of his right to take it. I stopped reading. That distinction was painfully simple. Ethan hadn't thought of himself as stealing because he planned to fix it later. The same logic echoed in the present. Sell Mom's house, buy her something smaller, use the rest. Everyone benefits. No one calls it taking. Robert's letter continued. That incident was why he changed the legal structure surrounding the house. Details were in the larger envelope. I opened it. Inside were bank statements from 20 years earlier. Withdrawal records, copies of checks, notes documenting Ethan's repayment. Then I found a thick set of legal papers. At the top was Robert's name. Below it was mine, and across the first page appeared a word I recognized but didn't fully understand. Trust. My heartbeat quickened. Robert had done something after discovering Ethan's withdrawal, something involving the house. I turned back to the letter. I am not leaving this because I expect Ethan to hurt you. I am leaving it because I may not be here to protect you if he ever convinces himself that needing something gives him the right to take it. I closed my eyes. For 20 years, Robert's warning had sounded almost unfair. Now it sounded prophetic. A soft knock came at the door. Patricia. Zoey, I opened it. She held 2 mugs of tea. I thought you might need this. I let her inside. She placed 1 mug beside me. Did you find what you were looking for, No? She looked confused. I found something I never wanted to know. Patricia didn't ask for details. Instead, she looked toward the open drawer. Madison lied to both of us. Yes, she sat on the edge of the bed. I don't understand why. I looked at the trust documents. I think I'm beginning to. Her eyes followed mine. I gathered the papers and returned them to the envelope. For the first time since coming home, my humiliation was fading. Something stronger was replacing it. Clarity. Madison believed this house would eventually belong to her and Ethan. Ethan had already shown me once decades earlier that when desperate enough, he could confuse needing something with having a right to it. And Robert had apparently spent his final months making sure that confusion could never cost me my home. I picked up the trust. There was a law firm's name printed at the bottom. Bennett and Hayes, Richmond, Virginia. I didn't yet understand what Robert had arranged, but I knew what I would do next. I would find someone who did. And until then, Ethan and Madison could not know that the drawer had finally been opened. By 6 that morning, Patricia had gone back to bed, and I was sitting alone in the guest room with Robert's papers spread across the blanket. I had locked the door. That small act felt strange. For nearly 40 years, I had never locked an interior door in my own house unless I was changing clothes. Now I was hiding documents from my son. I hated what that said about us. The trust was 37 pages long, filled with language that seemed designed to make ordinary people feel foolish. Grantor, trustee, beneficiary, life estate, distribution, successor trustee. I read the same paragraphs 3 or 4 times and still wasn't certain what they meant. But some things were clear. My name appeared repeatedly. So did Robert's. Ethan's appeared far less often than I expected. I found a yellow legal pad in the envelope with Robert's handwriting on it. He had translated several sections into plain English. Zoey controls the house while she is alive. No sale without Zoey's authorization. No transfer to Ethan simply because I am gone. If Zoey sells, proceeds remain hers and stay protected under the trust structure. I read that last sentence twice. Then I sat back against the headboard. Madison's voice from dinner returned immediately. You could buy a smaller place outright and still have a significant amount left. The rest could help Ethan and me finally get back on our feet. Except there was no rest belonging to them. Not legally, not morally. Robert had made certain of that 20 years ago. I turned another page. There were instructions about what happened after my death, but I forced myself not to get distracted. The important thing was the present. As far as I could understand, Robert had deliberately structured the house so that nobody could treat his death as a transfer of authority over me. The thought brought tears to my eyes. He hadn't trusted Ethan completely. That hurt. But underneath the hurt was another realization. Robert had trusted me. He had wanted me to remain in control of my own life. At the bottom of his legal pad was a name. Samuel Bennett. Bennett and Hayes, Richmond. A telephone number followed, though I doubted it was still current. 20 years was a long time. People retired, businesses closed, buildings were demolished. I picked up my phone and searched the firm. To my surprise, Bennett and Hayes still existed. The office was on East Main Street. I clicked the staff page. Samuel Bennett's name appeared under firm history, retired. Then another name caught my attention, Rachel Bennett, managing attorney. Her biography said she specialized in estate planning trusts, elder financial protection, and probate matters. I stared at her photograph. She looked to be in her mid-40s. Samuel's daughter, perhaps. I checked the hallway before calling. A receptionist answered. Bennett and Hayes, good morning. My name is Zoey Lee. I'm trying to reach Rachel Bennett about an old trust. Are you an existing client I don't know? The woman paused. I almost laughed. My husband was, 20 years ago. What was your husband's name, Robert Lee? Typing clicked in the background. Do you know the approximate year, 2006? More typing. Then silence. One moment, Mrs. Lee. I waited. A minute later, another woman came on the line. This is Rachel Bennett. Her voice was calm and professional. Mrs. Lee, you said your husband was Robert Lee, yes. And Samuel Bennett prepared documents for him, I believe so. I found a trust with your firm's name. Another pause. Do you have the documents with you? Yes. Can you tell me the date on the first page? I read it. Rachel became very quiet. Mrs. Lee, are you currently considering selling your home? The question startled me. How did you know that? I'd rather discuss that in person. A chill moved through me. I didn't call because I wanted to sell. All right. My son and daughter-in-law want me to. Another silence. This one felt heavier. Have you signed anything recently? I thought about Madison's paperwork before my surgery. Some insurance forms, maybe medical paperwork, anything involving your home, not knowingly. Power of attorney? I don't think so. Her tone changed, not panicked, sharper. Mrs. Lee, until we meet, please don't sign anything else. My fingers tightened around the phone. Why? Because I want to review the trust and confirm exactly what authority exists. Does Ethan have authority I can't responsibly answer until I've reviewed the complete file? She hesitated. Can you come in tomorrow morning? Yes, bring everything you found. I looked at Robert's envelope. I will. Then Rachel said something that made my stomach drop, and Mrs. Lee. Yes, if your son puts another piece of paper in front of you before our meeting, don't sign it. The call ended. I remained on the bed holding my phone. Rachel's warning had been too specific. She wasn't merely explaining general legal precautions. Something had made her ask whether I was selling. Something had made her ask about Ethan. I needed to know what. A knock sounded. I hurriedly gathered the papers and slid them beneath the blanket. Who is it, me? Ethan. My heart pounded. I opened the door only halfway. He stood in the hallway holding coffee. Peace offering. For what, he gave me a tired smile. Last night. I accepted the cup but didn't invite him inside. Madison gets intense. Madison called a realtor to evaluate my house, I know. And you allowed it. It's only an evaluation, Mom. I studied his face. The boy I had raised was still there somewhere. But now I couldn't stop seeing the 23-year-old Robert had described. The young man who had taken money because he intended to put it back. Ethan, I said quietly, do you believe this house belongs to you? His expression changed. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Of course it doesn't belong to me. Then why are you making plans for it? He looked away. We're trying to help. There it was again. Intent replacing permission. He started down the hallway, then turned. By the way, Madison said you were upset about Dad's dresser? I am. We can keep it if it means that much to you. For some reason, that frightened me more than an argument would have. His tone was suddenly accommodating, careful, as though keeping me calm had become important. After he left, I locked the door again. I returned the documents to Robert's envelope and placed them inside my suitcase beneath folded clothes. Then I looked at the old safe deposit box key lying beside the ledger. There were still pieces I didn't understand. But one thing had become clear. Robert hadn't simply left me evidence of Ethan's old mistake. He had built a wall around my independence, and someone very recently seemed to be looking for a way through it. Tomorrow morning, I was going to find out who. The next morning, I told Madison I had physical therapy. It was the first deliberate lie I had told anyone in my family in years. I hated how easily it came. At 9:30, I parked outside Bennett and Hayes on East Main Street with Robert's envelope inside my handbag. Rachel Bennett met me in the lobby herself. She was younger than I expected, maybe 46, with dark hair cut just above her shoulders and the composed expression of someone accustomed to delivering difficult information. Mrs. Lee, Zoey, please. She shook my hand. Then I'm Rachel. Her office overlooked downtown Richmond. I sat across from her desk and placed Robert's envelope between us. For nearly 20 minutes, Rachel said very little. She read, she examined signatures, she compared dates. She studied Robert's handwritten notes. Finally, she leaned back. This trust is valid. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What does that mean for the house? It means exactly what your husband intended. You retain control over your residence and its use during your lifetime. Ethan cannot sell it. He cannot force a transfer. And he does not automatically gain control simply because Robert died. And if I sell the proceeds, remain protected for your benefit. So Madison's idea that we sell the house, buy me a condo, and give them what's left would require you to voluntarily agree to that. I haven't. Then they have no right to it. Relief moved through me, but Rachel wasn't smiling. There is something else. The relief disappeared. She turned toward her computer. When you called yesterday and gave me Robert's name, I checked our recent contact records. Recent? Yes. She folded her hands. Someone contacted this office about 2 weeks ago asking questions about this trust. I stared at her. Who? We don't know. What do you mean? The caller didn't become a client. No formal representation was established. According to our intake notes, the person asked whether an old trust could be terminated or modified if the surviving spouse was no longer capable of managing her affairs. My hands went cold. Surviving spouse, Rachel nodded. The caller specifically referenced Robert Lee. I couldn't speak. The notes also mention you. What did they say about me? Rachel's voice softened. That you were experiencing memory problems. For a moment, I heard nothing but the hum of the air conditioner. I don't have memory problems. I understand. I drove myself here. I know. I manage my own appointments. I pay my bills, Zoe. I'm not suggesting the claim was true. I looked toward the window. 2 weeks earlier, I had been staying with my sister. Madison had called almost every day. How's the knee? Are you taking your medication? Did you remember your appointment questions I had interpreted as concern? Now they sounded different. Did the caller say Ethan's name? Rachel checked her notes. Yes. My stomach dropped. In what context they asked whether an adult son could assume control if his mother became unable to manage the property. I closed my eyes. Not proof, but close enough to frighten me. Rachel leaned forward. Have Ethan or Madison ever suggested that you're confused? Not directly. I thought about it, then corrected myself. Madison has started correcting me about small things. What kind of things? She'll say I've forgotten conversations we never had, like the bedroom. She told Patricia I'd agreed to move into the guest room. Rachel wrote something down. Anything involving finances. I suddenly remembered the papers Madison had given me before I left for Carol's house. My eyes opened. There was paperwork. Rachel stopped writing. What paperwork? A few days before my surgery, Madison said we should organize insurance and medical information in case something happened. Did you sign it? Some of it. Rachel's expression became serious. Do you have copies? I think so. I searched my handbag. Months earlier, I had developed a habit of photographing anything I signed because Robert had always done the same. I opened my phone. There, a folder of photographs. I handed the phone to Rachel. She enlarged each image. The first was a medical information release. The second dealt with insurance. The third was an emergency contact form. Then Rachel stopped. What? She didn't answer immediately. She enlarged the document. This is a financial power of attorney. My throat tightened. I signed that, not the execution page. I leaned forward. At the bottom of the photographed page, my signature appeared only as initials, acknowledging receipt of information. Rachel swiped to the next photograph. The final signature section was blank. Relief hit me so hard I almost felt dizzy. What would it have done if properly completed? Potentially a great deal. Depending on the powers granted, an agent could manage accounts, transactions, and other financial matters on your behalf. Could Ethan sell the house? Not necessarily. The trust complicates that significantly. But this document could have created serious problems. I stared at my phone. Madison had placed it between medical forms. No explanation, no conversation, nothing. I didn't know. I believe you. Rachel returned the phone. Zoe, I want you to be extremely careful now. With Ethan, with anyone asking for your signature. I thought of my son's face, the coffee, the sudden gentleness. We can keep the dresser if it means that much to you. A horrible thought occurred to me. What if they try to say I'm incompetent? Rachel didn't dramatize her answer. That isn't something they can simply declare. There are legal standards and procedures. But if someone is building a narrative that you're confused, dependent, or incapable, you need to document your own decisions carefully, building a narrative. The phrase stayed with me. My bedroom had been changed while I was away. Patricia had been told I requested it. A realtor had been scheduled without my consent. Madison repeatedly described decisions as things we had already discussed. Now someone had called a law office claiming I had memory problems. I felt something inside me harden, not bitterness, awareness. Rachel copied the trust documents and gave me instructions for securing the originals. Before I left, she looked directly at me. Don't confront them yet. Why? Because right now you know what they may be trying to do. You don't yet know how much Ethan knows. That was the question I had been avoiding. Madison could lie. Madison could manipulate. But Ethan was my son. Some stubborn part of me still wanted to believe he was being pulled along. When I returned home that afternoon, Madison was waiting in the kitchen. She smiled immediately. How was physical therapy? Fine. Good. Because Ethan and I have some paperwork we'd like to go over with you tomorrow. My heart gave one hard beat. What paperwork? Nothing complicated. She smiled again. Just something that will make it easier for us to help you. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I smiled back. All right. For the first time, Madison mistook my silence for surrender. And I let her. Because tomorrow I intended to find out exactly how far my son was willing to go. The next morning, Madison made me tea. That alone should have warned me. In 3 years of living under my roof, Madison had learned exactly how I took my coffee, but she had never once made tea for me unless I was sick. Yet there she was at 10 o'clock, placing a porcelain cup in front of me with honey on the side. I thought this might be better for you. Better than what coffee? With your medication. I looked at the cup. My doctor hasn't told me to stop drinking coffee. I know. I'm just trying to take care of you. Take care of you. Rachel's words from the day before returned immediately. If someone is building a narrative that you're confused, dependent, or incapable, I smiled. Thank you. Madison seemed relieved. She sat across from me. How's your knee improving? Still hurting at night sometimes. You've seemed tired. I had surgery. Of course. She smiled again. Too much kindness, too carefully measured. 10 minutes later, Ethan entered, carrying a blue folder. My stomach tightened. He sat beside Madison. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Ethan placed the folder on the table. Mom, we wanted to go over a few things. What things? Just planning. Madison touched his arm. It's nothing scary. I almost laughed. People usually don't tell you something isn't scary unless they know it might frighten you. Ethan opened the folder. Several documents were clipped together. I've been thinking about what happens if you need help with bills while you're recovering. I pay my bills. I know. Then what's the problem? No problem. We're just trying to make things easier. There was that word again. Easier. Madison slid the papers toward me. This would let Ethan help manage certain things if necessary. I didn't touch them. What things? Banking, household expenses, maybe dealing with insurance, and the house. Madison answered too quickly. Only if needed. I looked at Ethan. He stared at the papers. Something inside me pleaded with him. Tell me you don't know. Tell me Madison arranged this. Tell me you're simply trusting your wife. Give me one reason to keep believing the boy I raised would never knowingly try to take control of my life. Instead, I asked the question Rachel had suggested I use. Ethan, have you read these? He looked up. What? Every page. Madison shifted. Zoe, they're standard documents. I asked Ethan. He looked at me. Yes. My heart sank. Every page, yes, Mom. Do you understand what they do? His jaw tightened. Yes, that was the moment. Not when I found my clothes in boxes. Not when Madison gave Patricia my bedroom. Not when I learned someone had called the law firm. That moment. Because until then, I had kept one small shelter inside myself. Madison is controlling him. Ethan doesn't understand. My son would never deliberately do this. Now that shelter collapsed. I nodded slowly. When do you need these signed? Madison relaxed. Friday would be ideal. Why Friday? We have some people coming. What people? Ethan answered. Just someone who can witness the paperwork. And the realtor silence. Then Madison said, she may stop by too. I leaned back. So Friday is important. It would help us move forward, Madison said. Us, not me. Them. I'll read everything. Madison reached for the folder. We can explain it now. No. Her hand stopped. I want to read it alone. Ethan gave a small nod. That's fair. Was it guilt I saw? I wanted it to be. I'll give you an answer Friday. Madison smiled. Perfect. I took the folder upstairs. Behind the locked guest room door, I photographed every page and sent the images to Rachel. Then I sat on the bed and cried. Quietly. I had spent 20 years protecting my image of Ethan without even knowing Robert had once done the same. Robert had hidden our son's first betrayal from me. I had hidden the possibility of his second betrayal from myself. A soft knock interrupted me. Grandma. I wiped my face. Come in, Lily. She slipped inside and closed the door. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. You don't look fine. Children become teenagers, but sometimes they still see through us better than adults." I patted the bed. She sat beside me. "Your parents gave me some paperwork." Lily looked toward the door. "I know." My attention sharpened. "How they've been talking about Friday. What have they said?" She hesitated. "I don't want to get them in trouble." "You aren't responsible for anything they do. I know." She twisted the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "Mom left her laptop open last night. A message popped up from Dad." I waited. I wasn't snooping. It was right there. "What did it say?" Lily pulled out her phone. "I took a picture because... I don't know. Something felt wrong." She showed me. It was a conversation between Ethan and Madison. "Madison, once she signs, we can put the house on the market before she changes her mind again." My stomach tightened. Then Ethan's response. "Just get through Friday." 4 words. No confusion, no misunderstanding, no Madison manipulating him behind his back. My son knew. I handed the phone back. "Thank you. Grandma, are they trying to take your house?" Her voice cracked. I put my arm around her. "You don't need to worry about that, but listen to me. This is not your job to fix." Tears filled her eyes. "Are you going to make us leave?" I couldn't answer immediately. She wasn't asking about Ethan or Madison. She was asking whether she was losing her grandmother. "No matter what happens between your parents and me, you are my granddaughter. Nothing changes that." She leaned against me. I held her until she stopped crying. After she left, I called Rachel. She had already reviewed the photographs. "Zoey," she said, "do not sign these. I won't." There's a financial power of attorney along with several authorization forms. Individually, some are ordinary. Together, they could give Ethan significant control. I know he understands. Rachel became quiet. "How do you know?" I asked him. And he said he'd read every page. I looked at Lily's photograph again. "And I have something else." I described the message. Rachel listened. Then she said, "Friday is no longer just a meeting." "What is it?" "The day they expect you to surrender control." I looked across the guest room at the boxes containing pieces of my old life. "No," I said. "They think it is." That evening, Ethan passed me in the hallway. "Everything okay, Mom?" I looked into my son's eyes. For the first time, I didn't search for excuses on his behalf. "Yes." He smiled. "Good." I smiled too. "See you Friday." He walked away believing he had 2 more days until the house began becoming his. What Ethan didn't know was that I had finally stopped being afraid of losing him, because I was beginning to understand that if keeping my son required surrendering my home, my money, and my voice, then I had already lost something far more important. And on Friday, Ethan was going to learn that too. Thursday morning, I met Rachel at her office again. This time, I wasn't carrying Robert's envelope like a frightened widow looking for answers. I was carrying it like evidence. Rachel had printed every page I had photographed from Ethan's blue folder. She arranged them across her conference table and walked me through them one by one. "This authorizes access to certain financial information." She touched the next page. "This allows broader communication with institutions on your behalf." Then she reached the financial power of attorney. "And this is the document I'm most concerned about." I looked at Ethan's name where the proposed agent was identified. If I signed everything, how much control would he have? Potentially significant control over your finances. The trust still creates barriers around the house, but that doesn't mean the process couldn't become expensive and stressful if someone tried to challenge or work around those barriers. And Friday, Rachel folded her hands. "I made some calls based on the names and contact information in the documents you showed me." I waited. "A realtor is scheduled to come to your home Friday afternoon." I knew that. "There's also someone coming to handle signatures and witnessing." My stomach tightened. "So they expected everything to happen at once. It appears that way." I stared through the conference room window. They really thought I would sign. Rachel's expression softened. "They may have mistaken your trust for weakness." That sentence stayed with me. For years I had believed keeping peace was one of my strengths. Maybe it had been, but strength used without boundaries could become permission. "Cancel it," Rachel said. I looked at her. "The meeting." "Yes, you don't owe anyone a performance." For a moment I considered it. One phone call could end everything. I could return home, tell Ethan I knew, refuse the documents, and lock the door. But something stopped me. "No." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "I want Friday to happen." "Why?" "Because Ethan has spent 3 years watching Madison make decisions in my house without correcting her. He watched her take my bedroom. He knew about the realtor. He read those papers." My voice trembled, but I continued. "And if I confront him privately, he'll tell me I misunderstood." Rachel didn't interrupt. "He'll say they were helping me. Madison will say I'm emotional. They'll explain everything until I'm supposed to apologize for being upset. So what do you want? I want the truth in the room with us. Rachel studied me. Then she nodded. All right. We discussed exactly what I would do. I would not sign anything. I would not accuse anyone of crimes. I would not threaten Ethan with Robert's old records. I would simply allow Ethan and Madison to explain what they wanted. Then Rachel would explain what they could legally have. Before I left, she handed me a folder. Inside was a formal notice prepared in case I decided Ethan and Madison could no longer remain in my home. I stared at it. You don't have to use it, Rachel said. I know, but merely holding it hurt. I had invited my son into my house because he needed somewhere safe to land. Now I was carrying paperwork that might force him to leave. When I returned home, Patricia was waiting on the back patio. Can we talk? I sat across from her. She looked exhausted. I called my bank this morning. I immediately understood this wasn't about my bedroom. What happened? Patricia folded her hands tightly. When I sold the condo, Madison offered to help me manage the money. I remembered Madison mentioning investments but had never paid attention. I let her handle most of it. Patricia continued. She said she'd put some into accounts that earned better interest. Did you give her access? Yes. Her eyes dropped. I trusted my daughter. There was no accusation in her voice, only shame. I recognized it immediately. Patricia, trusting your child isn't stupidity, maybe not, but ignoring warning signs is. What warning signs? When I wanted money for a deposit on an apartment here, Madison told me to wait. Why? She said the market was bad. Patricia gave a bitter little laugh. I asked for account information this morning. She told me she'd organize it for me. Did she give it to you? No. A cold feeling moved through me. Do you know where your money is? Not all of it? For a moment, neither of us spoke. Two mothers, two daughters and sons we had raised to become independent adults. And somehow both of us had reached an age where our children had begun treating our assets as things they were entitled to manage. I'm going to the bank Monday, Patricia said. Alone. Good. And I'm moving out of your bedroom. I looked at her. You don't have to do that tonight. Yes, I do. Her eyes filled. I wouldn't have taken it if I'd known. I believe you. I let Madison convince me that you were already stepping aside. The phrase struck me. Stepping aside. As though growing older meant gradually surrendering our chairs, our rooms, our accounts, our choices. I think she expected both of us to step aside, I said. Patricia nodded slowly. Then her expression changed. Does Ethan know the question hurt? Yes. You're sure I wish I weren't. I told her only what was necessary, that Ethan had read the documents and knew about Friday. Patricia covered her mouth. Zoe, I'm sorry, so am I. That evening, she quietly moved her suitcase into another room. Madison noticed immediately. What are you doing? Patricia zipped the suitcase, giving Zoe her bedroom back. Mom, don't be ridiculous. I'm not discussing it. Madison looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. Something had changed and she knew it. But she didn't know how much. At dinner, everyone behaved unnaturally. Ethan talked about the weather. Madison discussed Lily's school. Patricia barely spoke. I ate calmly. When Madison finally asked, "We're still good for tomorrow, right?" I looked directly at her. Yes. Her shoulders relaxed. Great. Later, alone in my bedroom again, I returned Robert's photograph to the nightstand. His chair was still in the garage. The dresser stood against the wall. The bottom drawer remained open. I placed my hand on its edge. 20 years ago, Robert had prepared for the possibility that our son might one day confuse love with entitlement. Tomorrow I would discover whether Ethan could still recognize the difference. I put Robert's envelope inside my handbag. Then I placed Rachel's folder beside it. One contained the past. The other contained my future. And for the first time since coming home, both were under my control. Friday arrived with the kind of ordinary sunshine that felt almost insulting. By noon, the house looked exactly as it had on hundreds of other afternoons. Light came through the dining room windows. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. A lawnmower buzzed somewhere down the street. But on my dining table sat a blue folder that could have changed the rest of my life. Madison had arranged everything carefully. The papers were stacked in front of my usual chair. 2 pens lay beside them. Ethan sat across from me while Madison remained near his shoulder. Patricia had chosen to stay. At 1:30, the woman handling the signatures arrived. A few minutes later, the realtor Madison had contacted pulled into the driveway. Introductions were made. Everyone was polite, almost painfully polite. The realtor opened her tablet. Madison smiled at me. This is really just about making things easier, Zoe. I looked at her. You keep saying that because it's true. Ethan leaned forward. Mom, nobody wants you worrying about Bill's maintenance insurance or this house. I've handled those things for decades, I know, but you don't have to anymore. There was the idea underneath everything. Don't have to. It sounded generous until I understood that what they really meant was shouldn't. Shouldn't manage my money. Shouldn't control my house. Shouldn't decide what happened next. Madison touched the blue folder. Once the authorization paperwork is finished, Ethan can help organize everything. Then we can talk seriously about listing the house. The realtor glanced at me. Mrs. Lee, just to be clear, nothing regarding a sale happens without your approval. Madison answered before I could. Of course, Zoe understands. I looked at her. Do I? Her smile faltered. I'm saying we've discussed it. No, you've discussed it. Ethan exhaled. Mom, please. I turned toward him. Do you want me to sell this house? He hesitated. I think it makes sense. For whom? For everybody. That's not what I asked. His jaw tightened. Yes, I think you should sell. And after I buy the condo Madison selected, we'd figure out the finances. You already figured them out. Madison crossed her arms. Zoe, nobody is taking anything from you. I almost admired how confidently she said it. I looked at Ethan. Then I asked the question I had carried inside me since opening Robert's drawer. If your father were sitting in that chair, would you still put these papers in front of me? Ethan froze. Nobody else moved. His eyes drifted toward the empty chair at the head of the table, the place Robert had occupied for years. Mom, that's not fair. It is a question. Dad's been gone 20 years. I know exactly how long he's been gone. Ethan looked down. Would you? I asked. He didn't answer. That silence hurt more than any answer could have. Madison broke it. This is getting emotional. No, I said quietly. For the first time, it's getting honest. I reached for one of the pens. Madison's shoulders loosened. Ethan looked up. For one brief second, I saw relief on both their faces. They thought I was surrendering. I held the pen over the papers. Then I set it down. From my handbag, I removed the tiny brass key. I placed it in the center of the table. The sound was barely audible, yet everyone looked at it. Ethan frowned. What is that? I watched his face. Your father's. His expression changed. Madison looked between us. What does a key have to do with this? 20 years ago, Robert locked something inside the bottom drawer of his dresser. Ethan went still. He told me not to open it unless something very specific happened. What? I looked directly at my son. Unless you forgot the difference between love and entitlement. The color began draining from his face. Madison laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. The doorbell rang. Nobody moved. I'll get it, I said. Rachel Bennett stood outside carrying a leather folder. I invited her in. When Ethan saw her, confusion crossed his face. Madison's expression became defensive. Who is this? My attorney. The word changed the room. Rachel introduced herself and sat beside me. Madison immediately began talking. This is just family planning. Nobody needs an attorney. Rachel remained calm. Mrs. Lee requested legal advice regarding the trust controlling this property and the documents she was asked to sign. Ethan stared at me. You went to a lawyer, yes? Behind my back? The irony almost made me laugh. Rachel opened her folder. For everyone's clarity, Mrs. Lee retains authority over the residence under the trust established by Robert Lee. Neither Ethan nor anyone else has the right to sell, transfer, or control the property without the legal requirements of that trust and Mrs. Lee's authorization. Madison's face tightened. No one said otherwise. You told Patricia I was transferring the house to Ethan, I said. Patricia spoke from the far end of the table. She did. Madison turned toward her mother. Mom. No, don't. Patricia's voice was firmer than I had ever heard it. The realtor quietly closed her tablet. I think my involvement should end here. I nodded. Thank you for coming. After she left, the room became smaller, more personal, more dangerous. I reached into my handbag again. This time I removed Robert's cream-colored envelope. Ethan watched it. His breathing changed. I opened it. First came the trust papers, then Robert's letter. Finally, I placed the 20-year-old bank records on the table. Ethan stared at the first page. He didn't need time to understand it. His face told me that immediately. Madison leaned closer. What is that? Ethan didn't answer. I placed another record beside it, then another. Withdrawal documentation, Robert's notes, repayment records, proof of the secret Robert had carried to his grave. Madison looked at her husband. Ethan. Still nothing. What did you do? His eyes remained fixed on the papers. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Mom, no, I had spent years allowing explanations to arrive before my own feelings had room to exist. Not this time. Your father protected you 20 years ago. Ethan closed his eyes. He believed one terrible mistake shouldn't define your entire life. Madison picked up one of the documents. What money? Ethan reached for it. Give me that. She pulled it away. You took money from them. It wasn't like that. Those words hit me harder than I expected, because 20 years earlier, according to Robert, Ethan had said almost the same thing. I leaned forward. Then tell us what it was like. Ethan looked at me. For the first time since Friday began, there was no confidence left in his face. Only fear. Not fear of losing the house. Fear of being seen clearly. I touched the brass key lying between us. Your father gave you 20 years to become a different man, Ethan. The room fell silent, and now I need to know whether you did. Ethan stared at the bank records as though they had risen from the dead. Maybe in a way they had. For 20 years, those pages had been locked inside a drawer while he built a career, married Madison, became Lily's father, and sat across from me at countless Sunday dinners, pretending that summer had never happened. Then he looked at me. Dad kept these. Yes, his face hardened. For 20 years, yes, a bitter laugh escaped him. So he never forgave me. That isn't what this means. Then what does it mean, Mom? He built a file on me and hid it in your bedroom. He protected you, protected me. His voice rose. He left a trap, no. The word came out so calmly that Ethan stopped. I placed my hand on Robert's letter. Your father could have told me when you were 23. He didn't. Ethan looked away. He could have told other people. He didn't. He could have spent the next 20 years reminding you of what you did. I paused. He died without ever using it against you. Madison stared at Ethan. How much did you take? That's not important. It is to me. It happened before I met you. That doesn't mean it isn't important. Ethan slapped his palm against the table. I paid it back. The sound made Patricia flinch, and there it was, the same defense Robert had written about. I was going to put it back. I paid it back, always focusing on what happened afterward instead of whether he had the right to take it in the first place. You're missing the point, I said. Ethan turned toward me. No, you're missing the point. I was 23. I made one mistake. I agree. That surprised him. So why are we doing this? Because I'm not judging the 23-year-old sitting at this table. I leaned forward. I'm judging the 42-year-old. Silence. You read the documents you gave me. His jaw tightened. You knew they could give you control over my finances. I was trying to help. You knew Madison contacted a realtor. We talked about it. You knew I hadn't agreed to sell. You weren't being realistic. There, finally. No more pretending. I felt Rachel shift beside me, but she remained silent. This is my home, Ethan. I know. Then why does your opinion about what is realistic matter more than mine? Because look at this place, it's too big for you. You just had surgery. There are stairs everywhere. You're almost 70. I'm 69, not helpless. I didn't say helpless. You didn't have to, Madison interrupted. Can we stop pretending this was all Ethan? Ethan turned toward her. What you wanted the house sold too. I never said I didn't. You're making it sound like I manipulated you. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The irony was almost unbearable. Madison looked at me. Yes, I thought selling made sense. Yes, I found condos. But Ethan was the one who said the equity could solve everything. Ethan's chair scraped backward. Don't do that. Do what throw me under the bus because your plan failed. My plan? Their voices rose together. Patricia stood. Enough, Madison turned. Mom, stay out of this. No. Patricia's voice shook, but she didn't sit down. You don't get to tell me to stay out of it anymore. Madison stared at her. What are you talking about? My condo money. Ethan looked confused. Madison's expression changed instantly. Mom, not now. Now is exactly when. Patricia looked at me briefly, then back at her daughter. When I sold my condo, you told me you'd help invest the money. I am helping. Then why can't I get a complete statement? You can. I've asked 3 times. Madison's face reddened. Because everything is spread across different accounts. Accounts I can't access, Mom. I want control returned to me. Madison stared at her. This is unbelievable. No, Patricia said. What's unbelievable is that I watched you do to Zoe what you had already started doing to me. Madison looked as though she'd been slapped. Ethan turned toward his wife. What accounts don't start? What did you do with her money? Nothing, it's invested, where Madison stood. Suddenly, the united front that had greeted me that afternoon no longer existed. They turned on each other with frightening speed. You're blaming me because your mother found out about your past. Madison snapped. You're the one who kept pushing the sale, because you kept saying we were drowning. We are drowning, and whose fault is that? Stop. My voice wasn't loud, but everyone stopped. I looked at Ethan, then Madison. I am not going to sit here while you decide which one of you deserves more blame. Neither spoke. You both knew I had not agreed to sell my house. You both discussed what would happen to the money. You both expected me to sign documents I did not fully understand. Ethan's face fell. Mom, I gave you this home when you needed somewhere to land. My throat tightened. I gave you 3 years without rent because I thought I was helping my son stand again. I looked around the room. Somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing that as generosity. My eyes returned to Ethan. You started seeing it as something I owed you. He lowered his head. Rachel opened the folder beside her. I nodded. She slid a document toward me. I pushed it across the table. Ethan looked at it. What is this formal notice? His head snapped up. You're kicking us out. I am requiring you and Madison to leave according to the legal process Rachel prepared. Madison laughed in disbelief. Where are we supposed to go? For 3 years that question would have destroyed my resolve. This time it didn't. You are adults. You'll decide. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Lily stood near the doorway. She had heard enough. Her eyes were filled with tears. Grandma, my heart broke. I immediately stood. She ran toward me. Are we leaving? I wrapped my arms around her. The adults have decisions to make. Are you mad at me? I pulled back and held her face between my hands. Never. But if Mom and Dad leave, you are my granddaughter, whether you live here across Richmond or across the country. She started crying. I held her again. Over her shoulder, I saw Ethan watching us. Something in his expression finally changed. The anger disappeared. So did the defensiveness. For the first time that afternoon, he looked ashamed. I kissed Lily's forehead. Then I looked at my son. Your father didn't set a trap for you, Ethan. He said nothing. He gave you 20 years. My voice broke slightly. 20 years to make sure I would never need to open that drawer. Ethan looked down at the records. And finally, he understood. The drawer had stayed locked through every Christmas, every birthday, every family dinner. It had stayed locked because nobody had been judging him. He had been free until he repeated the same mistake. Only this time, instead of taking money from an account because he intended to replace it, he had tried to take control of my home because he had convinced himself it would eventually belong to him anyway. Robert hadn't trapped my son. My son had simply walked back into the same choice, and this time I refused to protect him from its consequences. The house became quieter after Ethan and Madison left. Not immediately. For the first 2 weeks, there were boxes everywhere. Closet doors opened and closed. Packing tape ripped through the hallways. Madison moved through the rooms with tight lips and hard eyes, speaking to me only when absolutely necessary. Ethan barely spoke at all. They found a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of Richmond. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, clean, and theirs to pay for. Lily hated leaving. On moving day, she stood beside my front door with her backpack hanging from one shoulder. Can I still come on weekends? I hugged her. You don't need permission to be my granddaughter. That earned the smallest smile. I mean it, Lily. Whatever happens between your parents and me is not yours to carry. She nodded against my shoulder. When Ethan loaded the final box into his car, he looked toward me. For 1 second, I thought he might say something. He didn't. He got into the car and drove away. Madison didn't wave. I stood in the driveway until their taillights disappeared. Then I walked inside. For 3 years, I had imagined how peaceful the house would feel if I had it to myself again. I was wrong. Peace and silence are not the same thing. The kitchen felt enormous without Lily sitting at the counter. The hallway no longer echoed with Ethan's footsteps. There were no arguments behind closed doors. No Madison rearranging cabinets, no television downstairs late at night. I had won. So why did winning hurt so much? That was the part nobody tells you about boundaries. Sometimes doing the right thing still breaks your heart. Patricia stayed only another week. She went to her bank, removed Madison's access where possible, gathered records, and met with her own financial advisor. The money hadn't vanished, thankfully. Much of it had been moved into investments Patricia didn't fully understand, but she was able to regain direct control. I should have asked more questions, she told me. We both should have. Patricia found a senior living community outside Richmond. Not a nursing home, but a pleasant apartment community for older adults with gardens, a fitness center, and transportation services. When she told Madison, her daughter reacted badly. According to Patricia, Madison accused her of choosing me over family. Patricia's answer surprised even herself. I am choosing myself. Before leaving my house, she stood in the bedroom doorway. I'm sorry I slept in your bed. You didn't know. I should have asked you, yes, She smiled sadly. I'm learning, so am I. After she left, I finally began putting my room back together. I carried Robert's wedding photograph upstairs. I unpacked my clothes, then I went to the garage. His leather chair was dusty. I wiped it down carefully before dragging it toward the door. My knee made moving it impossible, so I called a neighbor who helped me carry it upstairs. When the chair returned to its old place beside the window, I stood looking at it for several minutes. Something settled inside me. Not victory. Restoration. I put Robert's photograph back on the nightstand, then I looked at the walnut dresser. The bottom drawer was still unlocked. I didn't close it. For the next few weeks, Madison didn't contact me. Neither did Ethan. Lily texted. Sometimes she called. She came over twice, and I made sure we didn't discuss her parents unless she brought them up. I wanted my house to remain a safe place for her. But after every visit, when the front door closed behind her, loneliness returned. There were nights when I questioned everything. Had I been too harsh? Could I have given Ethan another chance without forcing them out? Could I have simply refused the paperwork and let them stay? Then I remembered the message. Just get through Friday. And I remembered my clothes in cardboard boxes. I had spent years asking whether my boundaries might hurt Ethan. I had rarely asked what having no boundaries was doing to me. About 6 weeks after they moved out, the doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen making soup. Through the window, I saw Ethan standing on the porch, alone. No Madison, no Lily, no boxes, no blue folder. I opened the door but didn't immediately invite him inside. Hi, Mom. Hello, Ethan. He looked tired. Not physically tired. Defeated. Can we talk? I stepped aside. He entered and looked around as if seeing the house differently. Robert's books were back on the living room shelves. My photographs were back on the walls. Nothing dramatic. Just mine again. We sat at the kitchen table. For a while, Ethan said nothing. Then he reached into his pocket. He placed a key on the table. My house key. I looked at it. You don't have to? Yes, I do. He pushed it toward me. I shouldn't have access unless you want me to. That was the first thing he said that made me believe he had begun to understand. I didn't return the key. Ethan stared at his hands. Madison and I are having problems. I'm sorry. He seemed surprised I didn't ask for details. This isn't about her, though. I waited. I've been thinking about Dad. My chest tightened. And those records. He swallowed. When I was 23, I convinced myself taking that money wasn't stealing because I planned to replace it. I said nothing. I told myself I was borrowing it. His eyes lifted. And with the house, I did the same thing, how I told myself you would be fine. You'd have a condo, you'd have money, we'd get out of debt. His voice broke. I made it sound reasonable enough that I didn't have to call it what it was. What was it? He looked directly at me. Entitlement. The word hung between us. I lost my job, Mom. Then I couldn't find anything comparable. Every month I felt smaller. He rubbed his hands together. I started looking at this house and thinking, one day it'll be mine anyway. Why should we all struggle when the answer is sitting right here? I felt tears gathering. You stopped seeing it as my home, yes. He didn't defend himself. You stopped seeing me as the person who got to decide. Yes. His eyes filled. I started seeing you as the solution to my failure. That hurt, but truth often does. I am sorry. I studied my son. There was no request attached. No request for money. No request to move back. No request for the key. That mattered. Why did you come today? He looked around the kitchen. Because I wanted to apologize before I knew whether you'd forgive me. For the first time in weeks, something inside me softened. Not enough to erase what happened. Not enough to restore trust. But enough to remember that accountability sometimes begins after the consequences, not before them. I reached across the table and touched his hand. Ethan began to cry, so did I. But I left the key where it was, because loving my son and trusting him were no longer the same decision. And for the first time in my life, I understood that they didn't have to be. Ethan looked at the house key lying between us. For years, I would have picked it up and pushed it back toward him. That was who I had been. If someone I loved was hurting, my first instinct was always to remove the discomfort, forgive quickly, smooth things over, pretend the wound had closed because acknowledging it might make everyone uncomfortable. This time I left the key on the table. I love you, I said. Ethan nodded, tears still in his eyes. I know, and I forgive you. His shoulders dropped as though he had been holding his breath for 6 weeks. Then I continued. But forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you yet. He looked at me. I expected defensiveness. Instead, he nodded. I understand. Do you? I think I'm starting to. I touched the key. This stays with me. Okay, you don't move back in. I know. And I won't finance your way out of the problems you and Madison have. I didn't come to ask you to. I know. but I need to say it." He nodded again. For once, neither of us rushed to make the conversation less painful. That mattered. Over the next several months, Ethan began doing something I'd wanted him to do 3 years earlier. He started rebuilding his own life. Not with my house, not with Robert's money, with his own choices. He found a position with a regional distribution company. It paid less than his previous job, and at first I could hear embarrassment in his voice when he told me. Then something changed. He stopped talking about what he used to earn and started talking about what he could build from where he was. He and Madison began financial counseling. Their marriage remained strained. Madison still blamed me for turning everyone against her, according to Patricia. I refused to enter that fight. For too long, I had treated other adults' problems as emergencies I was responsible for fixing. Madison's relationship with her husband belonged to Madison and Ethan. Her relationship with Patricia belonged to them. My responsibility was my own life. Patricia kept her apartment in the senior community and regained direct control over her finances. She and Madison slowly resumed speaking, but Patricia established rules she had never had before. No shared passwords, no unrestricted account access, no financial decisions made without her. Lily continued visiting me. Most Saturdays she arrived around noon carrying school books she rarely opened. We baked cookies, watched old movies, or sat on the porch while she told me about school. I never asked her to choose sides. That may have been one of the most important decisions I made. Months passed. Ethan began coming by occasionally. At first he always called, "Is it okay if I stop by such a small question?" Yet every time he asked, I noticed the difference. He was learning that access wasn't automatic. One Sunday he repaired a loose railing on the back steps. Another afternoon he brought groceries because I had mentioned, not requested, that I was tired after physical therapy. He never asked for the house key back. He never mentioned inheritance. He never asked what Robert's trust would eventually give him. Slowly, cautiously, I began seeing my son again instead of the man sitting across from me on that terrible Friday. But trust returned differently than love. Love had survived. Trust had to walk home. One autumn afternoon, I went upstairs to clean the bedroom. Sunlight fell across Robert's leather chair. His photograph stood beside the bed, and against the wall was the walnut dresser. I realized I hadn't looked inside the bottom drawer in months. I opened it. The cream-colored envelope remained there. So did Robert's ledger and the old safe deposit box key. I had already moved the most important legal documents into a secure box, but I had kept Robert's letter in the drawer. I lifted the envelope. Something slid behind it. A small folded piece of paper fell to the bottom. I frowned. I had never noticed it. I unfolded it. 3 words appeared at the top. "One more thing." I sat down. Robert's handwriting continued. "Zoey, if you reach this page, you probably think I left all of this because the house mattered to me." I smiled through sudden tears. Of course he would anticipate me misunderstanding him. He continued, "The house is wood, brick, glass, and memories. Keep it if it makes you happy. Sell it if someday you want something else. I don't care what happens to the building." I stopped. For months I had thought protecting the house was the point. It wasn't. What I care about is that the choice remains yours. My vision blurred. Robert had understood something I had taken nearly 70 years to learn. Independence wasn't refusing help. It was retaining the right to decide what help looked like. The final lines were shorter. "Never let love convince you that surrender is kindness, and never protect someone from every consequence of their choices. Sometimes consequences are how people find their way home." I pressed the paper against my chest. For 20 years, I had believed Robert's final protection was the trust. Then I believed it was the evidence against Ethan. I had been wrong both times. Those things were tools. The real inheritance Robert left me was permission. Permission to say no. Permission to disappoint people I loved. Permission to protect my dignity without apologizing for it. I carried the remaining documents downstairs and placed them in my secure box. Then I returned to the bedroom. The bottom drawer was empty. I pushed it closed. The brass key lay on top of the dresser. For 20 years that drawer had been locked because it held a truth I wasn't ready to face. I didn't lock it again. 3 months later, Ethan and Lily came for Sunday dinner. Nothing elaborate. Roast chicken potatoes, green beans, and the apple pie Lily insisted on helping me make. We sat around the same dining table where everything had fallen apart. This time there were no attorneys, no bank records, no blue folders, no discussion of what would happen to my house when I died. Halfway through dinner, Ethan laughed at something Lily said. I looked at him. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't wondering what he wanted from me. He was simply my son, not my heir, not my responsibility, my son. Later, after they left, I went upstairs. My bedroom door stood open. Robert's chair was beside the window. Our wedding photograph was where it belonged. I ran my fingers across the dresser. Madison taking my room had once felt like the greatest humiliation of my life. Now I understood that losing the room had forced me to reclaim something far more important. My voice, my choices, my dignity, and this time nobody would pack them into a cardboard box again. For most of my life, I believed being a good mother meant giving until there was nothing left to ask for. But generosity without boundaries can slowly become permission. Not always because the people we love are evil. Sometimes people simply become accustomed to receiving. A favor becomes an expectation. An expectation becomes entitlement. And eventually they can forget there was ever a person on the other side of the giving. I also learned that forgiveness and access are not the same thing. I could forgive Ethan without returning his key. I could love him without paying his debts. I could hope his marriage survived without sacrificing my home to make that survival easier. And Ethan needed those boundaries too. For years I had protected him from discomfort because I thought that was love. Robert understood something I didn't. Sometimes consequences are the only mirror strong enough to make someone see who they've become. A home is more than property when it represents independence, memory, and the right to choose how you live. But even the house wasn't the real lesson. The real lesson was that my life still belonged to me. Age did not erase that. Motherhood did not erase that. Widowhood did not erase that. And saying no did not mean I loved my family less. Real reconciliation required Ethan to take responsibility without demanding immediate forgiveness, money, access, or trust in return. Only then could we begin rebuilding something healthier than what we had before. So let me ask you something. If you had been in my place, would you have given Ethan another chance after learning that he knowingly participated in the plan to take control of the house? Or would that betrayal have crossed a line you could never come back from? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you would have done. And if this story reminded you that protecting your dignity doesn't make you selfish, please like and subscribe. There are moments in life when the hardest person to finally stand up for is yourself.